bring it on in over here, and I'm just going to write something down for you. So, like, everybody always asks, I get this question all the time. People ask, like, hey, how do I know, like, what's appropriate? How do I know, like, what a good class is or isn't? How do I know who I should be training with or who I shouldn't be training with? Like, I get those questions on social media all the time, and even in classes, like, after class. So, something I always say for you guys, which is at, like, a simple foundational level for you guys to understand, is that intent is always prior to content. And it's not devoid of context, which is the most important thing that everybody forgets, right? So intent is prior to content and not devoid of context. So if we think about this, what does intent mean? Like, what's intent? So I provide you with a, like, let's actually go to content first. So content, I'm going to talk about, hey, this is how I advocate we do a reload. Like, this is how you should reload, right? And I make this content. The content is essentially what I'm advocating for or against, and how so, right? So it's essentially the what, right? What you're seeing, and then how it's being advocated for. Make sense? What's the intent behind that?
The why.
Yeah, the why, right? So we know that the why is the intent. Does that matter?
Yeah.
Yeah. Am I doing this to make a fancy video? Am I doing this to draw attention to myself for monetary gain? Am I doing this with the intent of making good Americans more self-reliant in their ability to defend themselves or others, right? Those are questions you're going to have to ask yourself. And then there could be a primary intent, a secondary intent, and a tertiary intent, right? The next thing is what? Context. Context. So when we talk about context, what do you think the context denotes?
When it applies.
We already got what, why, and how. What are we missing here? They begin with W's. Who it applies to.
And when.
When it applies to them. What else?
I guess why would be in there too.
Well, why would be up top on the intent side? Yeah, where? So if I'm like, hey man, you should carry this tool, and this is how you use this tool, right? My intent is to make you better. What you need to ask yourself is like, does that tool apply to me based on who I am, when I work, and where I work? Does that make sense? Like, we live in a day and age of like social media, right? Like YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, like all these other platforms. There is an overload, right? An overload of content. But what happens is end users, these consumers, so to say, don't necessarily know what is situationally or contextually, I should say, contextually appropriate for them, right? So they're like, hey, this dude is a professional. He does this thing. Like, so I want to buy that, right? Like for instance, we have a chef in the class. So I don't really know much about cooking. Like I can make food edible. Like I can make it safe to eat. It's not going to be very tasty, right? So I see chef with a $10,000 stove, a $4,000 pan, a $6,000 knife, and I'm like, I want all that. Like, contextually, is it appropriate for me? Probably not. Probably not, right? So just like little things like that we need to take into consideration. Guys look at gear and kit and hardware, and they realize, like, they start to focus on that, and they leave out the software side of the house. So I want to, like, start off the class with this and just get this understanding first and foremost. So when we start breaking that down for this 2-day class, defensive pistol, the intent, number one, first and foremost, I'm telling you right now, the intent is to make you guys better, right? Like, we used to be a nation of producers. We are now a nation of consumers, right? Like, we are not very self-reliant, okay? And the ultimate form of self-reliance, in my opinion, is your ability to defend yourself from harm. Like, most people think of harm and they think, like, a fight, but it could be far more than that, all right? So we want to make you better at that, number one. The content we're going to cover from an EDC perspective, what you carry on you on a day-to-day basis. Now, if you wear kit all day, wear kit all day. Like, wear it here if you want, right? Like, principally speaking, nothing's going to change. The individual TTPs, the techniques, the tactics, and procedures that we're advocating for will be in support of the context that we're providing right here. So, what the loadout looks like, what the tools look like, what the gear looks like, the setup, right, therein. All that is going to be based on what we think makes sense, based for you on your everyday carry, so to say, or your day-to-day travels, right? Whether you're doing it as a civilian or as a professional. So, and we're going to talk about all these aspects of it, again, from a self-defense approach, right? From a self-defense approach. You on that? at the foundation, the bare bones foundation upon which I'm going to build this structure, right? In SIOC, we talk about earning the draw stroke. You got to earn that, right? If I have two hands available, that is a gift. I'm teaching you the pistol work from an integrated combatives perspective. So integrated combatives, what we refer to as IC, is something that I learned directly from SIOC Collie, and that's specifically guys like Kyle DeFore, Kevin Estella, Bill Rapier, Tom Kyer, Harley Elmore. So those guys, right, like through SIOC, basically really push heavy into the integrated combatives portion, and they've been doing that since forever. So that's a lot of where I've learned kind of this modality from, separate from my martial arts background prior to with the JKD side of the house. But if I have two hands available to do that, that's a gift. And I'm gonna take it like I would any other gift, and I'm gonna do my thing. Make sense? However, if this hand is tied up, I don't wanna rely, right? I don't wanna build my foundation on the reliance of my non-firing hand, strong hand, other strong hand, another SIOCism, right? I don't wanna rely on my non-firing hand having to clear the garment for me. Make sense? First time they got introduced to me, I was by my buddy Bill Rapier, and he's like, okay, ready, go. I'm like, well, yeah, and he's like this, bink, right? So he's like, I can punch you in the face with this hand and then draw the pistol at the same time with this hand, right? So you become, again, more formidable when that's the case. Also, it lends to, as a father, carrying my kid, holding my son or my wife's hand, holding them back, right? All those little things. So what we're gonna do this weekend is we're gonna build the foundation of your draw stroke in light of, right, keeping this from a self-defense perspective and run it all from single-handed. Now, is single-handed slower than two-handed?
Can be.
It can be if you don't what?
Practice it.
If you don't practice it. So if your foundation has always been shoot ready, stand by, right? Then what's gonna happen is that's gonna be fast because you've developed that repetition, right? Now, if I'm like, hey, all of a sudden, hey, one-handed draw stroke, and you're like, you're doing all this funky stuff, like you haven't developed it like anything else. Even this wasn't fast when you first started. Make sense? So we're gonna build that. That's gonna be the foundation for the weekend. And the reason that I teach it that way is because it lends to every other class that I teach. When we start doing integrated combative stuff or blade stuff, all of it translates as one consistent system across the board. Make sense? So some of you are gonna have like your feelings hurt, put your ego aside, right? Like kind of deal with that and just be like, hey, I'm here with the intent of learning. This does have a practical application. And again, if I have two hands, use it. If I was standing at a distance that allows me to have two hands and use it, then I would, if I needed to, right? Like this absolutely is going to ensure that I don't do this because I'm holding that there, right? So, that mic wire slightly. So, any questions on that? Here's the way this works. I'm gonna teach it to you the way it was taught to me. So, my thumb is going to press into my inguinal crease. My thumb presses into my inguinal crease, right? Inguinal crease, we talked about that earlier when we talked about tourniquet stuff, right? So right along that line, and I purposely obviously dress around that. My shirt's baggy in order to help facilitate concealing the pistol as well as working, like giving me the ability to work these single-handed draw strokes. The more taut the garment is, the more difficult it is to accomplish this. So my thumb presses to my inguinal crease. The reason for using my thumb first is because if I foul that, and I do this, I always have 4 fingers as a redundancy to secure the pistol and then raise it thereafter. Make sense? So I use those 4 fingers as again, we talked about built-in safeties. I have my red dot, that's my primary, and if that goes down for whatever reason, I can't find it, whatever's going on, I have backup iron sights that coincide. Make sense? That's the safety. So my thumb presses the inguinal crease, ideally under the shirt. Once I do that, I'm going to raise, with a Z, raise the shirt somewhere between my nipple line and my clavicle. I'm gonna raise it as high as I can, and then I'm going to build my grip from there. So I'm now going to race the shirt back down. I race my shirt back down to establish that initial grip. If the shirt falls down on it, which it normally does, I don't care as long as I have my master grip established. Now, for me, master grip from the holster does not look like this. I personally don't like this. Take the pistol that way. The reason I don't like that, like thumb on, can you guys see this? So thumb on versus thumb off to the side, right? Thumb to the side on your master grip. A lot of guys are like, I don't like that. It's hard for me to get it behind my beer gut. It's also hard for me, I have to move this thumb to build my non-firing hand grip to put that back in. The problem with this is that it's very easy to percussion disarm the blade or the pistol, right? It's like having a fouled grip. Yep. So what I don't want to do is start developing the subconscious cold and on-demand response to be doing this, okay? So what I like to do is develop that grip that I know is going to be rock solid from the beginning. Because if we're working under the premise of a single hand garment clear, that means this hand is preoccupied. It's preoccupied because I'm jamming your hands down. It's preoccupied because I'm framing you out. It's preoccupied because I'm holding my kid. I wouldn't do this anyway. This is a compromised grip. I wouldn't shoot that way, right? So that's the way I like to do it. That's my articulation for such. That's the why behind it. I think it makes sense, again, from this lens, right? If you're always doing this, and this is like 10,000, 20,000 reps of you doing this because you're dry firing every day, what do you do subconsciously? Do you think you're gonna do this when it counts? Probably not, right? So I'm gonna build it to that, and if I don't need that, then I don't need it, but I'm gonna make sure that that's the redundant safety, so I don't easily get disarmed. You can absolutely get disarmed. It's just a lot easier when your thumb is not like holding onto the bar. Make sense?
See, I draw like that, like you said, thousands and thousands of times, but
As most do.
But once I clear, the thumb comes over.
Right. So just again, from a fighting perspective, when we start working entanglements, when you do that, are you starting this here? Now that gets bumped, and now you lose that grip, right? So it's more of all tactics work unopposed, and a lot of us do the inside the waistband stuff unopposed at the 10, 15, 25 yard line, right? Like, and then we go to a class where we're now pressure testing what we've done, and the biggest takeaway from the class, right, is I draw wrong, right? I draw wrong and I'm wearing the wrong gear, right? Because now that doesn't apply to this combative lens. Any questions on that? Say again?
So it was a good class then.
Yeah, exactly. We learned something. I'm trying to shorten that learning curve for you guys. All right, good to go on that? So let's, repetition wise, what we're gonna do is we're gonna all line up, clear the pistols, and we're just gonna start dry repping this. Dry fire practice, building the draw stroke. Here's the difficulty with this. A lot of guys don't like training this industry wise. Number one, they don't know it from a combatives perspective. They don't have that experience. Number two, like liability goes up, let's be honest, right? Like you especially start pushing the pace for speed, you do this, you get this fouled up, you come here and you go draw your pistol, gets hung up on something, and now the pistol goes flying out of your hand, right? That's a bad day. Or you get the shirt entangled in the garment, go to holster, shoving stuff back in, it's a bad day. So I'm gonna do this slow for you guys, so you guys can kind of see what that looks like. All right, just move that. So thumb goes to inguinal crease. I raise the shirt higher than I think I need it, and then I race the shirt back down. Once the shirt falls down, I'm not worried about that. Like that, I don't care about that. The redundancy for that, and this is again contrary to what other guys will do, is I cannot go immediately to my presentation, right? I can't go to my eye target line immediately. That would be faster, right? If I had this hand to clear that garment, I can literally, as soon as the muzzle clears the top of the holster, I can go one straight 45-degree line, if you will, to my eye target line. The problem here is that now with having the shirt, right? Having the shirt fall on top of that, now what happens if I do that, it gets caught on the optic or on the sight. And now I'm doing this, right? So what happens is the built-in redundancy and safety for that is, and again, from a space perspective, it's inefficient as far as time, right? Obviously one straight line is faster, right? Is it one, as the crow flies, it's one straight line, that's faster. The problem with that is that I don't get that consistently. What I consistently get is every third, fourth, fifth rep, especially when I start going fast, I get caught up on the shirt, right? So it ends up making me slower because now I have to add an immediate action to remedy that fouling, right? So what I'm going to do is, as I build this master grip, thumb along the side, like I said, I come straight up and then present the pistol to my R target line, my line of sight, my focal plane, whatever vernacular term you want to use.
And it doesn't get caught up as much when you go straight up?
You'll see it as soon as we do it. So I almost never, as long as I come straight up, it never gets caught up. If I go straight from point A to point B as the crow flies, as they say, I get caught up often, as opposed to, especially on a single-handed draw stroke, as opposed to coming straight up and then here.
Now with your thumb along the side, does that help prevent your garment from being snagged more if it just rides over?
If my thumb is up here, sometimes the thumb catches on the actual garment, and you'll see that sometimes, right? So again, I like having that down here. Again, less snag points, and by coming straight up, right, by not going out, by coming straight up, look what happens to the garment. Right? It just rolls out of the way with it. Which is, again, I get that it's slower from point A to point B, but it's also consistently reliable. Like, I'm not getting fouling, meaning my garment is caught up on my shirt. Garment-wise, I generally like stretchy. And the reason that I like the stretchy stuff is because if I ended up with a pistol or blade draw and I end up grabbing material, I can still flex through, right? I can still literally I don't want to stretch out this shirt unnecessarily, but I can still draw the shirt and then I have more flexibility with it. Sometimes the shirt will actually be caught up in the hand. I'm not worried about that. For me, gear-wise, I always wear an undergarment. That undergarment allows me to get my hand behind it. It also keeps a little bit of sweat off the tools that I'm carrying, blade, pistol, etc. And it makes it a lot easier to clear and grab the garment. You just got to make sure, like, material-wise, obviously you want the right material. And I buy it longer than I need it. I'm going to show you guys here what I do is I'll pull that down as low as I can get it so that it's not bunching up and then getting caught up. You want it to be like skin tight, kind of like a rash guard, or like, you know, Under Armour, like neck skin kind of. You want it nice and tight, and that just allows the draw strokes to be a lot smoother. So if there are no questions, we'll get to this and then the shooting stuff. Good to go on it?
Recommendations on the amount of overall shirts.
Yeah, so I like one layer separating me from my kit. So if I had a jacket on, let's say it was cold and I had a jacket on, I would unzip that jacket, right? So now there's one layer because the jacket's unzipped. If that jacket is zipped, it's now 2 layers. If it's not something that I can unzip, like a sweatshirt, I would take this and I would tuck this behind the pistol. Make sense? I want one garment separating me from my tools. If you're wearing those shirts, just be careful with them getting hung up in the back. What happens is most guys, when they get on the range, they do this. It's like, right? They do this Kardashian thing where they lift it over their rear end because what happens is the shirt gets caught underneath here. So what happens is when they go to draw, they do this, it tightens back here and then they can't get this up. So I generally will undo the button here. A lot of them now make the magnetic buttons, which are also good. But yeah, if you're going to, like if you carry at the 3 o'clock position, it's just a little more of a swimming motion as I go through the garment. I'm gonna go up, right, come straight up through, and I rotate back to grab the pistol at that 3 o'clock position. And again, I'm still, because this is gonna fall on, I'm still gonna come straight up and then out.